July 17, 2011. And they're saying, expect more levee failures. Several hundreds of thousands of acres of rich Midwest farmland and even some urban areas near the Missouri River are at risk of flooding this summer during months of historically high water that experts fear will overwhelm some levees, especially older ones. And here's a statue that's at a park there in Omaha, Nebraska. Engineers who have studied past floods say the earthen levees in rural areas are at greater risk. Most of the levees are agricultural levees. They're not just engineered, they're just dirt piled up, said David Rogers, an engineering professor at Missouri University of Science and Technology. So far, most levees have held along the 811 miles of the Missouri travels from the last dam at Gavin's Point in South Dakota to its confluence with the Mississippi near St. Louis. The flooding thus far has covered more than 560,000 acres of mostly rural land, including nearly 447,000 acres of farmland. The water has forced some evacuation, but the extent of the damage, too, may not be clear until it recedes. And that's not expected to happen until the fall, as the Army Corps of Engineers says it needs to continue releasing substantial amounts of water from upstream reservoirs inundated with heavy spring rains and the melt from the above-average Rocky Mountain snowpack. They've also said they don't have the money to repair these levees as it stands. And that's all part of Agenda 21. Eventually they're going to just take out all these levees and dams and let it go back to what it was like before Lewis and Clark ever came here. The Corps has predicted that the river will eventually rise high enough to flow over some 18 to 70 levees. Got that? It's going to go through another 18 to 70 levees, so be alert, people. Mostly in the rural areas of southeast Nebraska. I guess that's the first on their agenda to buy up the farmland. Southwest Iowa and Missouri. Other levees will become saturated and water can erode their foundations, seep underneath, or find other flaws to exploit. A saturated levee may lose stability, potentially cause it to crumble, as one did in June near Hamburg, Iowa, allowing floodwaters to cover several hundreds of miles of farmland and threaten the town. Flaws in levees such as animal burrows can allow water to flow through and eventually destroy the structure. At times like this is when we find out where the weak spots are, said Eric Lower, Associate Professor of Engineering at the University of Missouri. Rural levees, experts say, are likely to be older, privately maintained, and not tall or strong enough to stand up to such long-running floods. Corps officials and engineers experts are more confident than that city areas such as Omaha, Nebraska, Kansas City, and St. Joseph's are well protected by substantial flood walls that have been maintained. Omaha's main flood wall, for instance, is built to contain a river 40 feet deep, which is 4 feet higher than the river is expected to reach. But several of the rural levees in northwest Missouri are more than 2 feet shorter than the river's expected crest and have already been exceeded. Even stronger urban flood walls and levees can falter against the destructive forces of floodwaters. As a precaution, officials in Omaha and across the river in Council Bluffs, Iowa, have developed plans to evacuate roughly 40,000 people from areas near the river in case a levee falls. And they keep talking about this, but they also keep mentioning dams. A key factor in levee performance is what material was used to build it. Levees were often constructed using whatever material was near or could be delivered cheaply. Omaha's levees outside the city's main flood wall are built almost entirely out of clay, but barriers around the city airport and in Council Bluffs were designed with a clay cap over a different filler material. The designers at the time felt they were as good with less expense. than the solid clay layer levees, as long as they are maintained properly, said civil engineer John Larendu with the Corps' Omaha office. The standards for levee constructions have changed, with modern designers concerned more about fortifying the foundation material. Newer levees are likely to be built entirely out of clay or another non-porous material. Still, Judd Kuvan, who serves as the emergency manager chief for the Corps Kansas City district, said he feels good overall about the flood protection along the Missouri River, especially in downriver stretches. I believe here in the lower Missouri we have some of the best levees in the nation, Canuver said. Most levees in Missouri were rebuilt after the devastating 1993 flood that damaged thousands of homes, farms, and businesses, and set flooding records in the state. But that flood wasn't as bad in Nebraska and Iowa, so fewer of the levees in those states were improved recently. Southern Illinois University professor Nicholas Pinter, who studies river systems dynamics, said the Corps re-examined and modernized levees after flaws in many structures near the Gulf of Mexico became apparent in 2005. After Hurricane Katrina, the government realized some of the shortcomings of its levee systems, Pinter said. The flooding along the Mississippi and Missouri rivers this year has parallels to the catastrophe flooding of New Orleans during Hurricane Katrina. In each case, levees and flood protection systems overseen by the Corps and maintained by local levee districts provided inadequate against the massive amounts of water. But they're not an exact comparison. The levee that failed around New Orleans were protecting against fierce but short-lived assaults of a hurricane. The flooding taking place in the Missouri River Valley has been building for weeks, and the high water is set to last all summer. It's important to remember that levees and flood walls only reduce the flooding risk, Randu said, but don't eliminate it. I think it's in Iowa. They got a bridge that they're putting 400-pound boulders in that the water is still pushing. The whole system is going to be under pressure, he said. Statues of workers of various trades, part of the Monument for Labor by Matthew Plazik, stand in the rising water of the Missouri River in Omaha on June 15th. So they're saying anywhere between 17 and 70 more levees will probably fail before it's all done and over with. And the Corps is saying they can't release all the water that they have. They're going to store it up again, so expect more of the same next year. And also, too, they're saying they don't have the money to rebuild or repair these levees as it stands now. All right, bookmark our site. I'll keep you up to date. Stay safe. God bless.